What's the most disturbing scene in a fictional book or movie? King's The Mist. A mist covers everything and monstrous things lurk in it. Basically, anyone who enters the mist dies a gruesome death. So, at the end, father, mother, and son are sitting in a car, surrounded by mist. Father knows they will die horribly, so he shoots his son, then his wife. He puts the gun to his head, but it jams, or it was out of bullets, I don't remember exactly, and the mist clears to reveal the army. The mist had been defeated, right as he killed his family, then he has to live with it. Haven't seen it mentioned yet, but opening scene to Ghost Ship. Everyone is dancing on the deck in the moonlight when a cord rips, flings around, and slices everyone in half. Since it happens so fast, everyone is still alive for a few moments, sees the terror around them, then their tops slide off the legs. Big bloody mess. Great movie though. Ooh, there's a few, but personally I was shocked by a certain scene in The Pianist, concerning treatment within the Warsaw Ghetto. There were so many sad scenes in that film, but that scene where the Nazi officers come into a Jewish family's flat and order the family to stand to attention. A man in a wheelchair cannot stand at all, so the officers simply pick up his wheelchair and tip him off the balcony, and drive the family down the street, shooting them as they run. It was a horrific event, really showcasing the cold brutality of the Nazis, and the worst bit is that things like that were probably common. I'm probably forgetting some, but that scene will always stick in my head. Ninja Edit. Notice fictional after I typed it, and this technically doesn't count because it's based on a true story. It's still horrific though, so I'll leave it for you all. American History X. When Ed Norton's neo-Nazi character comes out and faces off with a group of guys who I think are trying to steal his car. He makes one of them lie on his stomach, put his mouth on the curb, and stomps on his head. That was a big pile of nope. It hurt me just to see it even though I knew they were acting. Series finale of MASH. Spoilers: the hero, Hawkeye, is visible mentally unstable, and it's unclear why. He talks to a psychologist and said it's because of the following events. Hawkeye was stuck on a bus that was full of passengers and they were trying to stay quiet because they were being tracked by the enemy. A chicken kept clucking. In fear, Hawkeye said, "Can't you shut that thing up?" The owner of the chicken then smothered the chicken, killing it but keeping the bus hidden. Later, it is revealed that the chicken was in fact a baby boy. In all seriousness, when Fred Weasley died in Harry Potter 7, he didn't deserve it. The worst part was what led up to it. His total twat of a brother, Percy, had been such a dick for nearly 2 full books, shows up for the end fight, and it's like nothing ever happened. Percy should have died, Fred should have lived. Guess there's no justice even in fiction. It's worse than just this though. Throughout the film, he does everything right. He makes all the noble calls and behaves completely rationally. He mostly puts others before himself and does his best to keep everyone protected and calm. Meanwhile, there is a completely irrational woman who, after being a bit of a dick, decides to run out into this mist to get her kids. Well, right after he kills his kid and gets out of the car to be eaten by these creatures. Who should he see riding merrily by with her children on a tank? Yep, Mrs. Irrational. The film really drills home the point. Life isn't fair. Edit. My memory. Not so much disturbing, but the road also contains one of my favorite ever character descriptions. He came forward holding his belt by one hand. The holes in it marked the progress of his emaciation, and the leather at one side had a lacquered look to it where he was used to stropping the blade of his knife. He stepped down into the road cut and he looked at the gun and he looked at the boy. Eyes collared in cups of grime and deeply sunk, like an animal inside a skull looking out the eye holes. He wore a beard that had been cut square across the bottom with shears, and he had a tattoo of a bird on his neck done by someone with an ill-formed notion of their appearance. He was lean, wiry, rachitic, dressed in a pair of filthy blue coveralls and a black bill cap with the logo of some vanished enterprise embroidered across the front of it. I watched HC2 with a few of my friends, all of us thinking it was going to be another mock horror, like the first one was. We couldn't have been more wrong. After watching, we all had a sick feeling, and for the first time, I really felt like I could have thrown up just from watching something. It was insanely gruesome. All the end was terrifying. When it came out, I was living in Boulder. There was some art house theater in Denver playing it, so me, one of my roommates, and a friend of his went down to see it. The place had stadium-type seating, and the house was packed. As the movie progressed, I could faintly hear guys apologizing to their dates, and I could vaguely see people getting up to leave. By the end of the movie, the only people left in this packed theater were the 3 of us, and like 10 other people. This theater held at least 300 people, and as I said, it was packed at the beginning of the film. I've never been able to watch it since. I am really impressed with Hannibal the TV show. I liked Hopkins as Hannibal in Silence of the Lambs, and was skeptical of anyone else's depictions. But shit, I think Mads Mikkelsen tops that. He pulls off the cold psychopath depiction, but he has crazy charm beyond Hopkins. Hannibal does bad things, and you still find yourself rooting for him. I mean, it's not like Breaking Bad where there is this progression and justification. Hannibal is evil and does evil/terrible/unjustifiable things, yet he just draws you in with his magnetic personality. And I want to mention how nicely that show is shot. Scene setups, transitions, colors, etc. It is amazing without being all, hey, look at us do art, and this is artistic and technical. It all flows nicely and fits within its style. Such a great job, and the most surprising part is that it's coming from NBC. They really stepped it up, and I think they deserve a lot of kudos for it. I mean, it's a product of the creators who happen to work for NBC, but NBC could easily try and micromanage it and ruin the vision/direction, and they have it. Yes, the cannibalistic Teniskauri, SP Army, purposefully starved so that they would know defeat meant death because their only food source was the people they defeated. The interaction with their leaders showed what a badass Sokovian was, though. And Talk the Younger's arc in that book was soul-crushing. The part that made me squirm the most is when he sees what he believes to be a homeless girl on a stoop and puts money in her cup because he finds her too young and beautiful to be homeless. It was only when the girl chewed him out that he realized that she was actually just a college student studying on the stoop, and he put money in her coffee. I haven't seen it since it came out, but from memory, humanity was getting into space travel. They had theory and plans for a ship that could travel by making wormholes. On the initial test flight, the ship disappeared. They figured it was lost and abandoned the program. Years later, the ship appeared around Jupiter, with no crew, giving off a concerning distress signal. So they sent a ship to investigate. I won't get into spoilers. The story is of the crew sent to investigate. The ship has a creepy vibe to it, eerily quiet, foreign-looking and unsettling scenery and equipment. They find video of what happened to the crew. Part of it was in the distress signal. I believe it is horror like how Hellraiser is horror. Not a cheap jump scare deal, but a slow burn psychological type of horror, which I prefer. Jump scares don't work for me because I feel safe and disconnected, and also there are usually big signs one is coming, like tense music. /spoilers, it's explained later that the compromise was never meant to be actually implemented. It was originally a last-ditch attempt by the government to shock each side into starting peace talks after they had basically been waging an extremely bloody civil war for several years. At the time, it was suggested it wasn't even medically possible, but shortly after the proposal was made, a researcher came forward with a way to make the procedure relatively easy to perform. The timing of this is also explained later. By that time, each side was so entrenched that they would rather take the fake deal than concede anything to the other side, and everyone else was so tired of the fighting that they just went along with it. The idea is that the person doesn't really die, or at least that's how the process is marketed. They just go and live in a bunch of different bodies. For example, in one part of the book, a kid who had a part of his brain replaced by a previous kleptomaniac unconsciously went home and dug up/gave all the stuff back. Berserk, action sequences aside, has one of the most depth-driven plots I've ever experienced. The sheer hatred that Griffith and Berserk guts exhibit for each other is impossible to fathom, unless you consider their thought processes that culminated in the eclipse. I still remember having discussing Griffith's break for a solid day with my ex. Watch the anime, it's actually better than the movies in many aspects. That being said, in Griffith's eyes, Guts is the betrayer. He abandoned the Hawk, and in the process left him defenseless. Griffith losing Guts shattered his very being. He never loses. Then, as they break him out, he sees the Hawks treating Guts as the leader, not him. Then, the moment he sees Guts and Casca kiss, that's when he decides to kill himself IRC. So, in a way, Guts created Femto and took everything from Griffith. Maybe not directly, but he was the root of it. Seriously, I just can't accept that this series doesn't get much attention because, for me, it's a genuine work of art. So beautifully produced, written, and acted that, in my opinion, rivals with the like of Breaking Bad, in terms of addiction and binge-watching. It is a great criminal/drama type show that makes Hopkins tremble in fear due to Mads Mikkelsen acting. Takes a whole new perspective to the character. Makes him a refined perfectionist that I just love to analyze as I am watching. Recommend it to anyone that likes a little bit of mind-fucking and twists and turns that you weren't expecting, combined with phenomenal acting and producing. 9 out of 10 for me. Graphically, this scene trumps the Red Wedding by miles. Emotionally, they're about equal, but the RW will always make me sad because, fundamentally, the Starks had it coming to them for poor choices in such a hostile environment. Never say GRRM kills characters for shits and giggles. You can normally see it coming miles away if you analyze like a robot as you read. Breaking Bad spoilers, I just remembered what he's talking about. It's after the train robbery and the kid shows up on his motorbike. Then Meth Damon takes it upon himself to shoot him. The opening scene of the next episode was Walt, Mike, Jesse, and Todd are disassembling the motorbike and putting it in the acid along with the kid. Considering King's track record on endings, I'm pretty sure he's jealous of every ending out there. Don't get me wrong, I like a fair amount of his work, but writing a satisfying conclusion to his stories is not one of his strengths. Looking at you, The Stand, edit. Just a heads up everyone, please don't spoil 11/22/63 for me. I'm currently reading it because I'm behind the times. The movie takes place in a post-apocalyptic version of the US. A man and his young son are attempting to get south on foot before the winter comes. The world has descended into chaos with roving bands of cannibals a common sight. The man and his son find a house that seems undisturbed, which is a rarity. They go down into the underground cellar of the house to look for food. When they turn on the light, a bunch of naked, legless people attack them. They have been locked in the cellar and used as a source of food by whatever band of cannibals has been living there. People griped that the end of the Dark Tower series wasn't all that great. But in all fairness, how exactly do you resolve a story of that scope and magnitude? And I'm not talking the size of the series, but the actual plot. It's a story that spans dimension, time, and pretty much the universe itself. How do you just wrap that up? Something that I only appreciated after reading it a few times was that there's more than 100 pages of mindless tedium before he actually kills someone. You get to a point where you're like, Christ, kill someone already. And then he does, and it's horrific, and you're confronted with the fact that you wanted it to happen in the first place. The rest of the book really makes you regret wanting to be a voyeur of all of Bateman's murders and sexual escapades, while still wanting something to happen that will break up the tedium of Armani Suits, Blaupunkt's, and Phil Collins reviews. You know, I'm a pretty depraved person by most standards. I have a dark sense of humor. I'm more desensitized to terrible things than the average person. But I find it absolutely disgusting and downright creepy that slasher movies are a socially acceptable medium. Like, everyone has seen the Saw movies. Why do so many people want to watch people get tortured? While I don't share it, I understand the appeal to some degree. But it seems like the kind of thing that would have an underground following, not something that would be shown in theaters and advertised on TV during daylight hours. I think it is taking both sides to the extreme. It's not realistic, but it shows the absurdity of both arguments by showing a natural extreme of it. For instance, the anti-abortionists win because they aren't killing anyone technically. The abortionists win because they don't have a kid anymore. OH and ITS saving lives, why? But I mean, that's the point. It's supposed to be absurd and grotesque. It's saying, okay, here's what happens if these two very real arguments are pushed to the absolute limit. Edit could probably also be seen as a way of showing how compromises aren't always a positive. It's the epitome of bad hyperbole. That book makes no sense and ignores human psychology when convenient for plot. Zan, I will agree that The Gunslinger might turn off some people. I almost didn't enjoy it, but I pressed on and you start to get a little more context. The Gunslinger pretty much starts in media res, and you have to sort of patch things together in a rather bizarre world. But it gets even crazier. I won't spoil it, but I won't lie when I say that the plot and setting transcends dimensions. What I will say is if you read a lot of King's other works, especially The Stand, you'll quickly gain a much bigger appreciation of all of it. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.